When I do something good, it's God. When I do something shitty, it's because I'm a shitty person.
Exactly.
Like, this is the exact same crap that is why I deconstructed from Christianity to begin with. Because it's just, you're not good enough on your own.
Maybe don't sexually objectify and disrespect the person that you want to be obedient to. Obedience is, that whole narrative is sexist in and of itself. If you're going to be going down this sexist road, be smart about it. That is not how you get what you want in this scenario.
Vashti's bold no and Esther's strategic yes are I would argue, equally daring, although they absolutely, of course, play out in opposite ways. Vashti's refusal is an act of direct rebellion. It's a very feminist book, actually.
Yeah. It's all about us, and it's time to bow down. Well, hello everybody, and welcome back to Bow Down. Dennis, as always, so lovely to see you, and to our listeners, welcome back. Lovely to not see you, but I guess feel your energy, be in presence with you. Thank you for being here. And today, we are continuing our Biblical Womanhood series with Esther, and I am so excited to chat about it with you, Dennis.
Me too. I'm so happy to be here. As always, Reese, you look lovely. It's lovely to be
Thank
here.
you.
And there's so much cool stuff to talk about today, with our time looking at and examining Esther, the story of Esther in the Old Testament. So we both sort of brushed up a little bit, I think, and reread and us maybe thought a little bit about what we wanted to say. But what are your initial thoughts as we go into this?
It's interesting because I'm always struck when I brush up or, do some research for these episodes, because most of the time I haven't done any modern research about it. Like Mary Magdalene and Mother Mary were really the only two biblical women that I had done like research into as an adult out of my own curiosity after deconstructing, because I had an interest in their archetypal figures and what they represent in different spiritual ways. But with any of the other women, like Jezebel, I'm forgetting we've talked about so many biblical women and all of the names are escaping me, but I've kind of...
Delilah, too.
Delilah, yes. I hadn't looked into them since I was in Christian school and read the story. And so same with Esther. So it's always really interesting to return and just be like, holy cow, I was reading this at 9. Like there's some stuff in here that one totally goes over your head, but also it's like, that is just wild. And the message that you're just told that this is what this means. And it's like, okay, you just accept it because you're 9. But now as an adult being like, why was that the message that was taken from this? That's so interesting. And it's also fascinating to me just to look at the context that surrounds it. So, for example, researching Esther for this episode, I couldn't really find any scholarship around it that wasn't Christian scholarship, or from like an apologetics point of view, which I'm sure if I took a little bit more time to dig, I probably could have. But I dug a little bit trying to find some differing viewpoints, and it was really hard to find anything. So I found that really interesting, that this project that we're doing isn't something that a lot of people are doing. And so I'm excited to contribute to the zeitgeist in that way. And also, yes, I think Esther as a biblical woman is a very cool figure in some ways. I think Vashti also bears some dialogue about, and that was something I had kind of forgotten about Esther. The beginning of her becoming queen was part of the narrative that I just kind of blocked out of my mind or never really been taught about, because that's not the point of the story. So I'm excited to talk about that. And then the last thing I'll say too, almost every single thing that I read or watched about Esther, of course, mentions how it's the only book in the Bible that doesn't mention God's name. But fascinatingly, I think like I maybe read or watched like 15 to 20 pieces of media, like articles or videos in total. Maybe one didn't say, yeah, it's the only book in the Bible that doesn't have God mentioned, but you can just tell God is all over. This is all like divinely orchestrated by God. And I'm like, why? How? Because that seems too unlikely to be a coincidence, and so you're just saying that? Like, interesting. So I found that to be really fascinating too, the couching around it, that it's like, and why do Christians feel the need to impose God here when it's not textually there? And why? Because theoretically, you don't, like, yes, the Bible is a religious text, but it's also a moral text. Like, if there's a good message from this that aligns with Christian values, I don't think it's the worst thing in the world for a religious text to include something that doesn't necessarily mention God if it's helping you live like Jesus in a Christian viewpoint. But I suppose because it's Old Testament and everyone's drinking a lot and having sex in this book, God has to be there. Yeah. What about you? First impressions and thoughts.
Yeah, I don't know. My first thought is for whatever reason, Christians seem to like the Book of Esther more than Jewish folks do in general. I mean,
Yeah.
I think like they seem to like at least again, I don't want to speak for every Christian but I can tell you that the churches I went to, in particular the charismatic churches, just thought Esther was the bee's knees, and like everyone should be. I mean, but it's the same sort of attitude that has a lot of the same folks supporting our president today. And such a time as this, and that kind of makes my blood boil a little bit, because you judge a tree based on its fruit, not on whatever nonsense you put, as your guide. So, I mean, and the thing is most of these videos just rehearse and rehash the same nonsense that they've heard from their pastor, who probably heard it from some other thing, who heard it from some other thing on TBN or somewhere else, and it sounds good, but I do agree with you. It's funny. In rereading this and sort of going through it, I had forgotten the whole framing of how Esther came to power in the first place, which I think is interesting. So maybe it would be worthwhile. I don't know. I can give a brief synopsis,
Yeah, that'd be great.
and then you feel free to fill in the gaps if I've forgotten anything. I have it open in front of me, though I read it, so I just want to make sure I grab it all. But the Book of Esther is essentially the dramatic story of a young Jewish woman who, from humble beginnings, rises to become queen of Persia, and against impossible odds saves the entire Jewish people from genocide. It's set in the Persian Empire under King, under the king commonly identified as Xerxes II. Oh no, Xerxes I. I'm sorry. So essentially, it starts with a clash between the king Xerxes, or whoever it happens to be, and Vashti, his queen. And so there's this huge bacchanalia, I'll call it, this 180-day feast featuring, essentially it's the original open bar, so tons of drinking, as you said, tons of orgies, I'm sure. And the king's having fun. He's put one on, and so he commands Vashti to come out and to show the everyone her beauty, essentially, which was very degrading, of course. So she says no. I mean, and again, it's like I tell everyone, no is a complete sentence. So she says no. This insubordination, of course, sends gets the king's panties all in a twist, and he can't take this. Puts out this really crazy royal decree. Vashti's gone. Every man should be ruler over his own house. It's just this. I mean, honestly, it would be funny, except it's the same reaction we're seeing in politics today.
Yes.
So you think this can't happen? This is exactly what's happening. So I mean, just
100%.
Anyway, so this is all prologue. This is chapter 1, basically. So the king is doing a bachelor. He's on The Bachelor. He's the bachelor, and he's got a bunch of women coming in. And Esther, who is a Jewish orphan raised by her older cousin Mordecai. And so she is gathered along with all of the beautiful young virgins of the land to have this contest. Now, this sounds like, this may sound good, but again, let's think about what this is. It's essentially a royal harem that the king is creating. Not too dissimilar from North Korea and the pleasure girls or whatever, his little cabinet of women that he's allowed, and so it's not a beauty pageant. This is really a forced roundup of women for the king. I guess in the sense that it is good to be king. And so Esther's in the harem, and ultimately the king falls in love with her, is captivated by her beauty and her demeanor. And it even says in Esther, the king loved Esther more than all the women, so he set the royal crown on her head and made her queen. That's in Esther 2:17. So now the Jewish orphan has become the queen of Persia. And so for a while, she's living as queen. She keeps her head down. She's avoiding trouble, but Mordecai, of course, finds out that there's this guy Haman who is very anti-Semitic at the time. Well, I mean, I don't know if that was a thing at the time, but disliked the Jews, wanted to get rid of them, had all these plans, had the king's ear. Mordecai finds out about it because apparently Mordecai's a kind of a bum, getting all the zeitgeist, hanging out like in the streets and stuff, and comes to her and it's like, and this is the very famous line, and basically kind of is like, hey, don't forget who you are, princess, queen. You think you're so powerful, but you think just because you're in the king's house, you're going to get away. And then who knows, but you've come to your royal position. And this is the line that every single video that you probably watched just has starred out, and like people put it on their vision board and everything else, for such a time as this, that's why you're here, everyone's here for such a time as this, I think. And this is really the turning point. So basically Esther decides to act. She does what she's not supposed to do, which is to go before the king, and when she does so, if he doesn't extend his scepter for her to touch, that it's okay. In other words, that she visited him, she could be put to death, but she bravely does it anyway. He sees her touch, and basically she strategizes. She now is the adversary against Haman, who is trying to get rid of the Jewish people. Esther plots along with Mordecai, figuring out what to do. Eventually, at a second banquet, she makes her move. She reveals to the king that she's Jewish and that this wicked man is trying to kill her people. And basically, the king, who's not really apparently paying attention to what's going on, he's like, "No way, that can't happen. Who would do this?" And then, basically, she's like, "Haman has." And I mean, long story short, Haman had built gallows to kill the Mordecai and people he didn't like, and all the Jews. He's hung by it instead. The decree that was made is unmade in another way. He can't change the decree, but he sort of sidesteps it for everyone. And so while he can't stop it being open season on the Jews, which is what the decree was, he is able to let them defend themselves. So it basically turns into what would you call it, the purge? I guess I don't know, but they've got weapons too, and she's a national hero, and the story is read every year at Purim, I guess, with great rejoicing. But I think really, again, the Christians tend to use this a lot more. At least in my experience. So
yeah.
I don't know. Did I miss anything there? Did I miss anything important?
The only thing I'll throw out there is that the motivation, I guess, for Haman to want to kill all the Jews, literally, was Mordecai firstly found out that the king, like two of the soldiers were plotting to kill the king. Mordecai tells Esther, who tells the king, therefore Mordecai saves the king's life before all this goes down. But then Mordecai isn't wanting to kneel and like give thanks or something before Haman, and that makes Haman mad, and Haman somehow learns that Mordecai is a Jew, and that's kind of what sets this off. So in addition to Esther being Jewish and going before the king and saying, there's this guy who wants to genocide Jewish people, there's also the added benefit of, and Mordecai, who has saved your life, is also kind of a part of this contingency, is Jewish. and is kind of raised to Haman's position after. So just that for a little bit of coloring there as to some motivations. But yeah, I think that's a really good overview. Of course, there's so many more nuances and details in there. So definitely read for yourself. Don't just take what we say as gospel truth. But but yeah, let's start from the beginning with Vashti being dethroned. And start from the beginning of it and go from there. Initial thoughts on that, Dennis?
Yeah, I mean, from my perspective, I see two very distinct models of resisting patriarchy here. So I
Mm,
think on the one hand, you have Vashti, and on the other hand, you have Esther. And I think they both are resisting. Um, and so Vashti's bold no and Esther's strategic yes are I would argue, equally daring, although they absolutely, of course, play out in opposite ways. I mean, the Vashti's refusal is an act of direct rebellion. And what I love about that, it's a very feminist book, actually.
yeah.
In the Bible, probably the most, I would argue, possibly the most feminist book. I'm
Most
not
of the
sure
men are kind of dumbasses, and the
yeah,
great
yeah,
people
it's
are women in the book, which is interesting.
well, and it's also interesting, as we'll talk about, I think, to see the shift in Esther as well, who starts by taking orders, but eventually grows into her own power and starts giving
Yeah.
orders, which I absolutely love. But I mean, essentially, she Vashti refuses to be objectified um, by this drunken queen. Even if it costs her everything, which I love. I actually think it's such a bold act to feel that way and to do that. And Vashti never, I mean, we never hear anything from Vashti. We don't hear her words, but her actions are so loud and clear to me. They say no. She refuses to become the sexual object of drunken men, essentially. And then so the narrative, this whole then you have this over the top reaction, right? Which I think actually does go nicely with some of the other things we've been talking about recently in terms of of this backlash, right? So we're not, every man needs to be in control of their own house. Like this is this is ridiculous. Like and I mean you can just imagine this, get control of your woman sort of thing, like that sort of thing. It's very much a so I see this as a cautionary tale. Um, but I think it's also fair as we look at it through our lens that Vashti is a woman of dignity who stood up for herself. When you just point blank, she said no. And it's really unprecedented in biblical literature. I don't think
Yeah.
any of the other women, certainly we've talked about, maybe have said no, frankly. Pretty much everyone says yes. So this is about the first no, I think, that
Yeah.
we've talked about.
Well,
Um,
and just the power of like, and no means no. Take away my crown. I don't care. Like, I will not do this. And one thing that one scholar who was talking about the comparison between Jewish reading of Esther and Christian reading of Esther is that in Jewish feminism, there is this kind of new honoring of Vashti for her behavior, because apparently in Purim, a bunch of little girls always want to dress up like Esther. And the woman in this video was talking about how, and I always told my kids, like, you should dress up like Vashti. Like, she is awesome. I want to be like her. And I found that really interesting. And to speak to your point about like the difference in potentially Jewish and Christian interpretations, it may be, I would need to do more research into this, but it may be a bit more common to see honoring of Vashti's legacy and narrative in Jewish circles. That's kind of my inferring here. Again, I would need to do more research to confirm that. But also, I think another thing that this woman brought up was that in the time, once men got to this point, like after the banquet, after dinner, they're drunken, that is when the wives go home, but the concubines and sex workers come out. And for the queen to be invited at the time of concubines and sex workers being invited, it's not just parading her around in front of drunken men as a sexual object, which it is very much that in the text, but the contextual analysis and the subtext is also, you are at the same level as a queen as the concubines, which we could go into, you know, how being a sex worker does not make you any less than and all of that good stuff. But within the context here, you can absolutely see how it's not just objectification, but it's also, which is disrespectful in and of itself. But as a queen, to be told, like, and you're not, you are just a pretty face, and I do not respect you more than I respect the people who weren't virgins when they got married, or and all of the values that they have. So I thought that was really fascinating too, that it's like, not only are you disrespecting me as a human being, but you're disrespecting my role and my title. So take it away then, because if I don't have this title anyways, no, take it away, but I will not sacrifice my integrity. Yeah.
I love it. And I love how, it really, I think if you really, when you dive into the text, there seems to be a mocking of the reaction, right? It's an exposure of how absurd when you really read it. And honestly, until I reread it and looked at it and did some of this, studying, preparing for this, I don't think even I caught it, because it's not something that's often taught. I mean, Vashti's not even mentioned in the Christian, because it's all about Esther's obedience, and Mordecai's kind of the star anyway. In at least in my memory of the teachings that I've heard about Esther, it was, Esther was it is really all about Esther's obedience, and they neglect to even mention why she had, how she even got to be in a position where she could be, why she was even there to begin with, which was Vashti's absolute refusal to be debased in that fashion. But the wise, I think you said it really well earlier when you said, really, the men kind of all look like fools in Esther, and you're absolutely, that is so true, because the wise men look very insecure and foolish, basically turning a domestic spat into this crisis, right? And they're just so worried that, like, the women of Persia will hear about this and stop obeying their husband. Is it that easy? Can I don't know, maybe all women should just stop obeying their husband, and maybe that'll fix our world today. I don't know. Or are people obeying their husbands a lot? I don't know.
Well,
but
and the other thing that comes to my mind is, like, one, this whole, like, obedience narrative, I think, is deeply problematic in so many senses, right? Like, women are not animals. They are not there to just obey. Right. However, if we want to talk about how you actually do garner obedience from someone, that means you need to have their respect. Like, if we do want to talk about obedience and you do want women to be obedient to their husbands, how do you train a dog, which is the way you're treating women? You give them treats and rewards when they do good things. You give them attention and you pet them and you play with them. You make sure that they have everything that they need so that when the time comes to be obedient, they feel safe and secure in that obedience. So maybe don't sexually objectify and disrespect the person that you want to be obedient to you. Like, one, obedience is, that whole narrative is sexist in and of itself. Two, if you're going to be going down this sexist road, be smart about it. Like, that is not how you get what you want in this scenario. Like, we want women to obey their husbands, so we need to do this whole thing. Okay, what if you just treated your women better? It wouldn't have happened if you didn't objectify Vashti in the first place.
Absolutely. And it's just so and what's so funny to me is like, because of this, like, crazy, like, every woman needs to listen, every man should be head of their household. Like, basically something that probably no one would, it reminds me of that, remember that, like, about a month or so ago at some concert, maybe, I don't remember what concert it was, but, like, the CEO and the HR director were
at
caught
the
on
Coldplay concert.
Coldplay concert. Yeah, that's what it was. Like, and the cam showed them, and, like, they, he freaked out. Like, it's the, like, had he just been cool, chances are,
Never
like,
would have,
it
yeah.
never would have been brought up. Maybe, I mean, I don't even know if anybody would have noticed it, but the very fact that he got, he wasn't, and we see it too with this, like in with this administration in politics too. Like, they're constantly like feeling the need, and all they do is like bring attention to it. So that same thing happened. Like, no one probably would have known about this thing, except now they're making this big deal about it. So yeah, I really do. It is interesting because I think we don't know much about Vashti other than she says no. Like, piss off. Like, I'm not doing
Yeah.
that. It cost her a lot.
Yeah.
I mean, it apparently, it cost her, her crown. It cost her her position. It might have cost her her life. I don't know that the story says one. I don't think the story
Yeah,
says
I
one
don't
way
think
or
it
another.
says.
One would think that it very well might have. Kind of
Yeah.
hard to imagine a world in which it didn't. 3,000 years ago. But
Yeah.
in any case, her bravery sort of really her bravery and her refusal to be made an object like that is what set the story to allow Esther to even happen in the first place. So I think
Yeah.
that's important to call out.
Well,
And it really is.
and also in comparing the feminist choices between Vashti and Esther, one thing that is so lauded about Esther is that she was in the castle. She had the crown, and she risked that to save her people, right? She risked the money. She risked the title. Vashti did too, and not just risked it, but lost it. She was willing to lose it and did lose it for what she believed. So if we're applauding Esther for that same thing, which I agree, like risking what you have for your integrity is a deeply honorable thing to do, but why is that never talked about with this choice? But Esther's choice is. And I can see how, like, it is the Book of Esther and just personal autonomy being the thing that you're risking it for versus an entire nation of people. Like, the scales are a bit different. But again, I think the spirit of that choice is the same, that it's like, if we're going to celebrate Esther, we should also be celebrating Vashti. They both risked the same thing, and actually one had a lot more consequences personally.
I agree with that. So Vashti, I think, is a forgotten heroine of the Bible. Actually, we don't know
Yeah.
much about her, but I love that, and I'm glad we're able to give her her 5 minutes of fame here. Perhaps
Yeah.
no one ever talks
Yeah.
about Vashti. Might have to write
No.
some articles about Vashti. Actually,
Yeah.
Anna, she needs more screen time, frankly.
Yeah.
Um,
Totally.
but no, I think it's interesting to contrast Esther's path versus Vashti. So Vashti was this no, like a direct no, whereas Esther takes this indirect path of resistance. For much of the story, particularly the earlier parts of the story, Esther is absolutely operating within the confines, the rules that were crafted of this patriarchy. She plays the beautiful object, if you will, conforming to exactly what's expected by the king, by society. And you can see this interestingly, I think, in the text in terms of the passive verbs used. And I'm not a scholar in Hebrew, so I researched this. I assume it's true, but um, there's these passive, and we see this in the text, and at least in the translation, but she was taken into the harem. She was given cosmetics. She obtained favor through compliance. She essentially survives by going along to get along, blending in, not making waves. And um, and I think there is an argument to be made. Was she a little bit too passive here? Was she, I'm curious, just in hearing that, reading through this, did you feel maybe she was complicit with the patriarchy? I mean, even to the point where Mordecai is like, hey, you think you're gonna be okay with all of this? Well, I got news for you, sister, sort of thing.
Yeah.
I don't know. What did you notice? Did anything
I
come up for
don't
you?
I don't know if I specifically thought about it in terms of being complicit in the patriarchy more than just like a little confused as to like in rereading, I was just like there was very little that I was like, what are we actually celebrating? Like I was just more like, huh, the whole time. But I suppose she is quite passive in just going along until Mordecai kind of needs her title to talk to the king about the genocide that Haman is planning. Um So it does feel like she is just kind of used as a tool. And the piece that really stood out to me was like her beauty being the thing that got her into that position in the first place. Because if she wasn't beautiful and the king just didn't happen to fall in love with her, she would have been made another concubine. Because in the story, we're told like all of the virgins that are gathered up go get to spend their one night with the king, lose their virginity, lose any of their like quote unquote merit for getting married in to anyone else of noble standing, and are added to the court's concubine harem, right? And she was willing to just do that. And I get that women didn't necessarily have the choice to opt out in that way. And maybe this was the path to living the best life. Like maybe being a court harem was actually a pretty decent life. I don't know in terms of autonomy for women, but it does just seem like you got really lucky, girlfriend, that you were picked by the king. And what did she do to earn that title or get into it except for be beautiful? And then lied, which I get the need of lying about her ancestry as well, because obviously being Jewish wouldn't be looked good well upon. But I was just kind of like, so you could have just been a concubine, but we have this whole story based on chance, luck, that you were beautiful. I was just more confused. And I guess her choice to take action in the end, I don't know. She is just pretty passive through the whole thing. And even that one choice, it's like everyone honoring, like, and she risked it all. I'm like, did she? Like, I guess, yes, she did risk being in the castle and being queen, but could she have, I guess at that point she couldn't have gone back to life before, but I don't know. It just didn't feel as noble to me. And I guess I'm now talking in circles trying to put my finger on to why it didn't feel as noble as Vashti's sacrifice, but there was just something off about, like, she's kind of a milquetoast character. And I don't know if that's because she is just a tool of the patriarchy or if she just doesn't claim agency and autonomy. I don't know.
Interesting. I think also, I wonder if, I mean, when there is a crisis, though, she does move, right? So that's I mean, in some senses, what was she supposed to do? I mean, there really wasn't a crisis before then.
Yeah.
You know, in the sense of, like, what was she? I mean, she chose to be part of the harem. You know, and yes, she was very beautiful and sort of dominated through submission in some senses by being very agreeable, go along to get along. Obviously, must have been very good looking. But when the pivotal moment arrives, I do think
she
it sets her
in
motion. And again, I guess, should she have done something beforehand? I don't know. Was there a motivation? Yeah. It's like the hero's journey, right? She had no particular journey at that point yet, you know, and this was the call to action, if you will. Mordecai gave her the very classic call to action, right?
Yes.
You know, that's the call to adventure right there.
Absolutely. And what you're saying before, like, there really is no crisis before. And what is a woman supposed to do except for go along to get along? Because I think, like, in an ideal world, she would have said, no, I'm not just going to, like, sleep with the king and potentially be a concubine for the chance at being his queen. But how do you create a good life for yourself at this point in time as a woman? Like, I think she is doing the best she can, right? The whole time. And I do think that that's admirable. But
well, even more so because she's an orphan, which is not, I mean, you know, if you think, you know, going back to, and again, not that I'm some expert in society at that time, but I have to feel like being an orphan was probably very difficult. I mean,
she doesn't exactly have a banging dowry.
Right. She doesn't have a banging dowry. She doesn't have anyone to protect her but Mordecai. You know, I mean, so, I mean, honestly, if I'm her, I mean, I can't imagine growing up as an orphan is a particularly great life. And all of a sudden now she's able to be, you know, in the harem. Forget about queen. Like, honestly, like, I feel like, you know what, that's not again, it's not freedom, obviously.
Right.
You know, so I don't want to, like, you know, a beautiful pink, sugar-coated cage is still a sugar-coated cage. I don't care how pretty and bedazzled the cage is. A cage is still a cage, whether it's got
Right.
iron or whether it's got diamond for bars, gold or iron, it's still a cage regardless. But I do think it does. I mean, they do both risk their lives, I guess.
Yes.
And I'm curious, Vashti, is Esther's yes as brave as Vashti's no? So is Esther choosing to approach the king? Is that as is that the same bravery as saying no in the first place? I'm curious as to your thoughts on that. I think it's an interesting question, actually, in terms
Mm.
of which does take more courage to say no publicly, which Vashti did, or doing risky work from within. So taking down the system from the inside versus taking down the system from the outside. Which takes more courage in your opinion, and
Yeah.
why? And why?
I mean, I think on one hand, they do both risk the same thing, right? They risk the lifestyle of being queen and they risk their lives. So in that sense, I do think it's the same bravery, but I think to situate it in the context of what you've come from, I guess it's hard for me to make a full judgment call because we don't know how Vashti came to be queen. We just know how she exited her queendom. Um, but I think there is something about the going along to get along, the more that we're talking about it, that I'm kind of tapping into about myself internally, that does feel a little bit less brave to me and feels a little bit more cowardly in the sense of Audre Lorde writes, you can't use the master's tools to tear down the master's house. And so there is something about that is like the good people who get into politics to try and take the system down from the inside that still end up being a part of the system and having to play the game.
Well, it's like Animal Farm, right? Like, 4 legs
Yes.
good, 2 legs better sort of thing,
Right.
Yeah, everyone's taking it down from within. Like, I mean, I could make that argument to go join ICE. Like, there needs to be good
Right.
people in ICE. Wouldn't have anything to do with the 50 grand or that, as a bonus. Wouldn't have, I mean, it's very easy to say that. And I guess it's whatever helps you sleep at night.
Right.
And again, I'm not a big fan of purity tests, by the way. Like,
Yeah. Right.
I don't know what else Esther was supposed to do. Like, I think she did the best she could do given the circumstances she had. So I'm not critical of her,
One thing
not
we talked about is like there's no perfect victims. Like it's not fair to criticize someone who is like there's a knife at their neck. Like, oh, but you didn't like make the perfect decision. It's like, well, how could you? So I totally agree with that. So I think that is an interesting question, but I think their bravery is perhaps situated in different contexts, but brave is brave. And I think to be a woman at this time, period, just requires bravery.
I think now as well. I don't think anything's changed, Reese. I gotta be
Yeah.
honest with you. I mean, I think it's just as brave now as it ever was. I think it's certainly brave to speak out, like
Yeah.
Vashti did. But I guess the real question is how do you know if you're Esther the Queen or you're just cosplaying as Esther, really just to go along and get like what how do you when do you become part of the system, I guess? At what point? I mean, so Esther has an inciting incident, as we talked about. Like Mordecai's like, hey, I think you and did it if Mordecai had just been like, well, you're fine, but you need to help your people. Is that is did Esther just act because she was shamed into it? Would she have done it other? I mean, I don't know. I'm because Mordecai's very clear about that. Like, yeah, you think you're queen, but you know what? You think that's going to save you? Was that a veiled threat? Like, gee, I wonder if he finds, like,
Well,
I don't
and
know.
on that, I think because it's like I could tell the king that you're Jewish. It's like I know, which it's like if it was blackmail, right? It's hard to read the tone of the Bible sometimes. But one thing that I found interesting about Mordecai's motivations too is the fact that he does not the thing that originally makes Haman say this, right? That he wants to committed genocide against all of the Jews, Xerxes honored Haman, gave him a seat of honor, and all the royal officials at the king's gate knelt down and paid honor to Haman, but Mordecai would not kneel down or pay him honor. Then the royal officials at the king's gate asked Mordecai, "Why do you disobey the king's command?" Day after day they spoke to him, but he refused to comply. Therefore, they told Haman about it to see whether Mordecai's behavior would be tolerated, for he had told them he was a Jew. And I read that and I was like, dude, what the hell are you doing? Running around telling people that you're Jewish? Like, and then disobeying the king? Like, that just seems insane to me. Like, Esther went through all of this, hiding her identity, and everyone knows that you're her adoptive older cousin father figure. Like, why would you... That it just seems stupid, quite honestly, and I guess that speaks to the men's stupidity in this book. But I'm like, would this whole issue have even happened if Haman hadn't learned that Mordecai, who wasn't honoring him, was a Jew? And also, I totally get the integrity of not wanting to kneel down and honor someone that you don't agree with, but I guess in some sense, go along to get along at some point, right? Like, take a page out of Esther's book.
Yeah.
But there's just something about that is like, are you just stirring up trouble to stir up trouble? Or is he really that, like, convicted? But there was something to me about, like, the person who is at wrong, at fault, is Haman, right? Like, he was the one who gave the edict to kill all of the Jewish people. However, is there something that Mordecai could have done differently to prevent this from happening? And then he's going to go say, Esther, you got to fix this. Like, bitch,
Right.
that was she can't clean up your mess.
Well, that's exactly right. Like,
yeah.
And putting her life at stake for it. I mean, this was a completely manufactured problem. Like,
yes,
Mordecai's pride. Again, I'm not saying he should or shouldn't bow before this guy. It's not,
right.
But I mean, again, we do this shit all the time. Like, we do this shit today. People genuflect before Trump. But we do it even in other ways. I mean, forgetting politics, forgetting the king. Like, people do this all the time. Like, everybody does this. Like, you bow to authority in whether figuratively or otherwise. So, I mean, essentially, Mordecai creates this problem himself. Like, he basically causes a genocide or a potential genocide because he's too fucking stubborn to just, I don't know, go away. If you don't want to kneel before the guy, then fucking
Why
move.
are you here?
Just go somewhere else. Go into the building. Like, you're the guy who's got to be, I mean, and now you cause problems for Esther, who's got to save your dumb ass? Like, honestly?
Right.
Like,
right.
Again, when you think about it
and
that
again,
way.
I understand the integrity of, like, if this is a bad dude and you don't want to honor him, got it. I also understand, like, I am a Jew and I'm proud of my Jewish heritage and I don't want to lie about that. I can see the integrity in both of those decisions and I understand that. But it seems like there's probably a smarter way to go about holding your integrity. And if you know how court proceedings go, like, you got Esther, the queendom, like, maybe just get out of Dodge. I don't know. It just seems really unstrategic. Yeah. No, I agree. And then it's like, Esther, you got to do something about this. It's like, what? So there is just this very, like, weird piece to me about Mordecai's motivations too, that it's like, we don't have the full picture. We don't know exactly why all this is happening, but it's odd. It's odd to say the least.
Well, and not only that, but so, I mean, basically this whole idea where Mordecai's like, and who knows, but that you've come to your royal position for such a time as this. So, in other words, like, it's not your value that made you queen. It's not because you're good looking or you deserve it. You've got a great personality that the king likes you. No. It's not you. You're a piece of shit. But God set you up here for this time. And isn't that what the church does? Like, isn't that in general? Like, isn't that just a microcosm of, it's not, you can never be good enough. It's, if when I do something good, it's God. When I do something shitty, it's because I'm a shitty person.
Exactly.
Like, this is the exact same crap that is why I deconstructed from Christianity to begin with, because it's just, you're not good enough on your own. The only reason you're here is because you can save. You're here for a reason. It can't just be, I'm here because I'm good, on my own merits. No. The only reason Esther got in as queen was because for such a time as this, says Mordecai. Oh, I say phooey on that. I'm honestly, I think
I
that's garbage.
Totally agree. And it actually makes me think, before this, we were talking about sports games before we hit record. And it reminds me of when I was younger. Before I had deconstructed from Christianity, I might have been 7 or 8. And we would be at sports games or watching a game on the TV. And there would always be an athlete after they won who would say, all glory to God, or like point up at the sky and be like, it's all thanks to God. God won us this game, or whatever, championship or trophy or reward or award. And my mom would always say, that really bothers me. Like, we can give thanks to God. We can thank God for the gifts and talents that he has bestowed upon us. We can thank God for the strength. But God was not out on that court playing. God did not make that really awesome assist. God did not, divine the basketball in the midst of your slam dunk, like, especially in a post-Enlightenment scientific revolution age where we believe in materialism. Like, that's not happening, right? But yet you don't get to take any ownership, and it's like, you can say, like, I'm proud of myself and I worked really hard for that. Like, God's also not in the gym every single day. God's also not eating 7 egg yolks for breakfast and having protein shakes and whatever else crazy things athletes do. But he gets the glory of the win. And there is something that is just so self-defeating about that. And I completely agree. And it was one of the first times that I heard, well, maybe not one of the first times, because even growing up, like, most of my conditioning about Christianity came from outside of my family and in church communities or school communities I was in, not my parents. But it was a criticism that my mom had of the church and of Christianity that, like, really stuck with me, that it was like, oh, we're allowed to criticize this. And also, this is a problem. This is a weird thing. We can give thanks to whatever divinity we believe in, but we don't have to remove our agency in the process, especially because Christians rely upon the reality of free will for evil to exist and uphold their entire worldview. Therefore, you must have free will, and therefore your choice actually matters, because God's an insecure little baby who needs you to pick him. God's
God,
the ultimate pick me girl.
He is a pick me, isn't he? Wow. If you really pay attention, he's a pick me for sure.
Right?
Like,
and so we have free will, but that doesn't matter when it comes to doing anything cool or good or saving the entire nation.
Yeah, everything good
Jewish
is
people.
God, everything shit is me, and that's just, and thank God Jesus is there to make me less shitty. That's
right.
Basically Christianity in a nutshell.
Oh my God, this is such a tangent, but I saw a TikTok yesterday. I should have sent it to you, of a guy in a church, and there was a book on, like, the church front desk counter, and he was recording it, and on the front it said, the reason Jesus died, was, like, just what it said on the front of the book. And so he pans down and he picks up the book and he opens it. It's just a mirror. And I'm like, that is the epitome of, like, Christian flawed thinking, and why so many people are racked with shame and guilt from the church is because that is literally what you are told every day, is that you are the reason the best thing that has ever happened to this world died. It's like, yeah, that's gonna fuck you up. Sorry, I'm totally on a tangent now and away from Esther, but I thought that was really funny.
No, it's actually really true. I mean, but that's the thing, like, you have to turn off your brain.
Yeah.
Or, like, you have to turn off your any reason that you possibly possess in order to not see things the way they really are. And listen,
Right.
I have, again, just I would have so much more respect if it was like, yeah, I know it's probably made up, but I choose this because I like this. Like, no, like this is true, but none of this other stuff's true. But no, my flavor of imagining is real and true. Yours is
My
wrong.
magical
Like,
thinking is
yeah,
real.
right. My magical, yeah, exactly. Like mine is the right magical thinking and magic ritual, but yours are all evil and don't work really. But you shouldn't do them because maybe they do work. I don't know. We should be scared. No, they're powerless, but maybe they're not, because we don't want to talk about it. God forbid you use that Ouija board. You may have seven sons of Paul, seven spirits into you at that point, and you were a swept house because we got you baptized, buddy. And you. Anyway, I should stop.
Yeah.
I don't want to go off on a rant here, but
right.
So here's another
all great
question.
Things for listeners to research and investigate. But yes, your next question.
Yes. Well, I mean, I think this goes along with what we were talking about in terms of so Esther. I mean, I think we could argue Esther certainly leverages the tools of the patriarchy, the things that patriarchy values. So beauty, compliance, whatever, demure, blah blah blah, whatever you want to call it. Is so by doing so, is she being empowered? Is that empowerment? Is that complicity? Is it both? So is it like, how do you view no true Scotsman, right? It's that kind of thing. Like, what's your? I'm curious your take as a feminist, as somebody who's thought about this a whole lot. Like, where is it okay? Like, I mean, or where do you land on it?
This is actually a really hard one for me, because I think the thing that it does make me think about that, and actually came up a lot for me reading this because of the reference to concubines and Vashti's treatment and how Esther does have sex with the king before being made queen, and all of these women are being, again, these virgins that are having sex with the king, questionably being forced into having sex with the king and then being made concubines. It does make me think about sex work and this debate around like empowered feminist sexuality, because on one hand, you can say that women who are reclaiming their sexuality and owning it for themselves and then choose to be sex workers are using the tools of the patriarchy in their favor. They're reclaiming them and saying, well, if this is the system that I have to work within, let me use it to my advantage and make great money off of it and live my dream life, because men are dogs, so at least pay me. And that there's something empowering about that. On the other hand, you have people who look at that and say, I hear what you're saying, but isn't still playing into the flaws of the patriarchy, perpetuating it in some way. Even if you have the intention behind it that is empowering for you and therefore it feels feminist, are you not just perpetuating the fact that men's desire is being centered? Men's wants and needs and sexual gratification is still being centered in your life? Is that feminist? And also, is monetizing your body, even if you're choosing to be objectified, is objectification in any way, with any intention, something that we're okay with as a society and as intersectional feminists, right? And I'll be honest, that is a really hard debate for me, and I don't have a clean answer to it. And I think that it relates exactly to what you're talking about with Esther, where it's like she's using the tools of the patriarchy to her advantage, which is what sex workers do, right? And on one hand, I want to make it abundantly clear, I absolutely respect sex workers and the choice to have that as a career. I think it is absolutely a valid career choice and something that women should be allowed to do. I do know that for me, I would not be able to do it in a way that feels empowering. But also, I think different women have a different psychological relationship with their bodies, a different psychological relationship with sex, with intimacy, with objectification. And I think it gets difficult when we start telling women how they feel or how they should feel, right? Because theoretically, is there a sex worker out there who is doing it because she does have trauma and she thinks she's making an empowered choice, but actually she needs to work on some inner child integration and shadow work? Yes, there probably is. But me telling a woman that she's just a sex worker because she's traumatized is deeply invalidating, not helpful to her experience, and who the hell knows if that's even true? I don't know her life. I don't know her story. I don't pour her cereal. And all that does is hurt that woman. But I do think it's our responsibility as women to be making choices that keep future women in mind. And I don't know. I don't know. I don't know if using the tools of the patriarchy to tear it down can work. Again, Audre Lords can use the master's tools to tear down the master's house. Audre Lorde says he can't. But at the same time, how do you make forward progress without just completely tearing the system down? Are you forced in some way to use those tools?
Or are you putting yourself at a
don't.
disadvantage when? Are you putting yourself at a disadvantage if you don't? Like, I mean, honestly, I felt that's been the
Yeah.
Democrats' problem in the last 8 years, 10, 12 years. Frankly, is that, they're bringing, they're playing fisticuffs while the Republicans are throwing dirt in their face, kicking them in the balls, and pulling out a knife, and they're just like, wait, no fair. Meanwhile, they're
Yeah.
lying on the ground bleeding, while they're not. I mean, the only one I've seen who actually is doing something similar is Newsom with his crazy posts towards Trump, in terms of, like, he's the only one I've seen so far of any consequence who's actually, like, said, forget it. There are no adults in the room anymore. Can we just accept, like, why are we laboring under this assumption that somehow there's adults in the room anymore? Adults
Right.
don't exist anymore. Like, there are no adults.
and I really do go back and forth on that with, like, but is that the right, like, two wrongs don't make a right. You can't fight fire with fire, right? Like, is that the way, if you have to sacrifice your integrity to get to a place of integrity, like, what are we doing? It does feel like a bit of a non-starter, but when it comes to using the tools of the patriarchy, I honestly don't have a good answer, because I do believe that any woman who chooses any career path deserves to do so and deserves the freedom to do so, even if that's not a choice that I would make. But I do think that we all need to be making decisions that are supporting future generations of women, to be able to do that too. And I think with sex work, I also just want women to protect themselves. But again, those women know their lives so much better than I do. And just because I can't do it doesn't mean that those women don't exist. And I know several sex workers that are extremely happy and fulfilled and empowered in their choices and have been in therapy for years and are very happy with their lives. And I'm like, that's beautiful. That really is. There is still this question, and I just don't know if we have enough research around stuff like this yet, and do we really know the fruits that come of it yet? Maybe that's what it is. Like, do we really know what the fruits of this tree are going to be like? Because we haven't had time to the tree hasn't had time to blossom and produce. So maybe it's just one of those things that time will tell. But with Esther, that's kind of where I come down on that, is like, I can't really make a choice on whether or not I judge a woman for using the tools of the patriarchy or not, because I don't know what works. And I think if you feel like one thing works for you in your life that makes you feel empowered, do it. And if I wish I would know Esther's intentions here, and we just don't have that information.
True. Yeah. So, and another interesting thing I think is around another question or thought I had is around, because I think it's a big topic today, um, is around identity as well, right? So Esther is told by Mordecai in chapter 2 to conceal her identity. So she chooses to do that, right? She doesn't tell anyone that she's Jewish. Um, And I guess my question there is, particularly as somebody who would often, if I were at a job, I would not tell my employer that I'm neurodivergent. Um, and it's actually something at least in the community. Like, if you are on the spectrum, do you tell your employer that you're on the spectrum? Because that can be used against you.
Yeah.
And so to me, but here's the question, I guess, and is was Mordecai right to tell Esther to conceal her identity? Or do you feel that maybe that sort of normalizes code switching? So in other words, you go back to what is the cost? What is there a cost of that? So Esther was really code switching in some senses, right? She was not she decried her Jewishness. She pretended she wasn't Jewish. Now, again, she was an orphan, so maybe she wasn't. I don't know how she grew up, how Jewish she was, because she was an orphan. So,
Right.
again, but I guess the question is what's right or wrong there? Was it right? Should she have concealed her identity, or should she have not have?
Yeah. It's interesting you bring up uh employers and neurodiversity. I've been filling out some applications for different things at like different podcasting studios and stuff. And there's always the like American Disabilities Act. Do you identify with having a disability? And always on the list is anxiety and depression disorders. And I'm like, I have been diagnosed with generalized anxiety disorder and OCD. If I am being fully forthright and fully honest, per the terms of this form, I would check yes, I have a disability. The person I am applying to does not know which of these things I am identifying as. And I was talking to some friends about it, and then I was talking to my parents about it. And all of them unanimously were like, don't check the box. No, you do not check the box. And I was like, but isn't that what they're asking? Don't they need to know that for some reason? And then one half of my brain was like, well, and does that help you? Because do they get tax breaks or something if they hire someone with a quote unquote disability? Like, I don't know. But then also there's the question of like, does that hurt you? Because they don't want to deal with the quote unquote pain in the ass that it is to have to make adjustments and accommodations for someone who has a disability. And I think that it's really hard because there was something about everyone telling me, like, don't check the box, that did feel really invalidating. It felt like these people were telling me, like, your mental health and your experience and journey with mental health is not serious enough to merit this, to merit checking it. You're not actually struggling with anything. And that really hurt. It really felt like you don't live inside my brain and you don't know what it's like to be me, and you don't know that even if I don't need accommodations from a workplace, that doesn't mean that I don't have to work really hard in these ways. But on the other hand, I get it, because they are ultimately looking out for me and wanting to do its best, and I don't need accommodations from a workplace. And is that really just what they're asking? So in terms of being right or wrong in telling someone to hide their identity, one, I think if you're going to turn around and tell people your identity that is the identity that you're telling someone to hide, like Mordecai does in telling people he's Jewish after telling Esther to hide her Jewish identity, that's wrong. I think Mordecai in the story is wrong, because if you're going to tell someone else to do it, you have to do it too, for the same reasons. Like, that's just so hypocritical.
A typical guy. He creates a problem and the woman needs to clean it up. I mean, that's basically
Literally.
literally
Literally.
what happened here. He shit on the floor and Esther cleaned it up. I mean, that's
Yes.
basically
Yeah, totally.
basically it. I mean,
Totally. But I think in the broader sense of your question, that is like, should we be telling people to hide or open up about their identities? I think that should just be a personal thing that you're allowed to decide. Like, it's your information to share and tell. Do you feel comfortable? Do you feel safe? Do you feel open enough to be vulnerable enough about this certain aspect of your identity? But also, I think we need to be realists that we live in a world where even good people will see the quote unquote disability check mark and think, I just don't want to, like, is that going to be harder to deal with? Even, but I'm not an ableist, but you still make that choice. And I think as someone who, uh, if anyone is going through that, it's like, I think you get to make that choice for yourself. And if I was instructing someone about how to go about it, I would maybe present both sides and say, look, it could really hurt you in this way. It might be able to help you in this way. But ultimately, is this information that you want these people to know, knowing that it will impact how they think about you? That should be what it comes down to. And I don't think anyone should be telling anybody what to do or say about their identity, period. Because again, we don't know someone else's story. Same thing with me with the sex workers that I was talking about. If someone is reporting to me that they feel empowered and great and all of the awesome things about it, who am I to judge or question or doubt that? Like, your experience. Believe people when they tell you things. And I think same thing here. If someone doesn't feel comfortable opening up about their identity, that's their business. And if someone wants to share, you should feel honored and grateful that someone felt comfortable enough sharing that with you, which may be a little bit different than exactly what you're asking, but those are thoughts. What do you think? And like you said, you in the past would not tell employers about neurodiversity, but I would
Yeah.
imagine perhaps being a therapist, that might have shifted a little bit in your recent career. I don't even want to say change, but your path
Sure.
opening up in this new way.
An unfolding, a new
and
unfolding for
unfolding.
sure.
But yeah, how has your relationship with that changed, especially since you've come into new knowledge about yourself, right? Like, you were in the corporate world before you knew that you were neurodivergent. So, well,
Yeah.
had a label, I suppose.
No, no, I think being aware of something is probably the right way to say it. I mean, yes,
Yeah,
I've always been on the spectrum, like, but I was not aware of it until I got diagnosed. So,
right.
it's like if a tree falls in the forest. So, I didn't find out about it till I wasn't working in corporate America anyway. So, it in terms of what would I do is kind of an academic question because I don't plan to go to corporate America.
Mhm.
I can tell you it didn't cross my mind to do it prior because I wasn't aware of the fact that I was on the spectrum, that I knew I had ADHD, but I didn't really consider that to be something that would be a disability or something under the ADA. I never thought to use that as something my employer needed to know. Um,
Mhm.
what has changed? I think it's a very interesting. I mean, it's an interesting thought experiment. So change being Jewish in this story to being autistic. Like, so
Yeah.
Mordecai and Esther are autistic. Should Esther tell the king that she's autistic? Like, I don't know. Like, do you tell your employer you're autistic? Is that, I mean, not what would change if why would and so I think that's the question that I would ask folks in terms of, like the folks I would work with, should I tell my employer? The question I'd have is, well, what why would you what are your reasonings? What's the thought process behind telling your employer? Are you asking them for something? Do you need something? I mean, it's perfectly fine to say, I mean, you can also say things like, hey, I'm not very, and these are all self-disclosures. They're all dangerous, but something like, hey, I can sometimes struggle with auditory information, so I'm going to send you an email that captures everything we talked about. I just want to make sure that I'm not missing anything. Like, now is that acceptable? And that's something one could do, not being autistic, not being neurodivergent, but just say, hey, I just want to make sure I found that this avoids
Yeah.
confusion in the future. So some bosses don't like that. They're generally shitty bosses because they actually don't want anything on record. So that would be the first, that would be the first thing. Like, what is the purpose behind letting your employer know? Is it, no, if you need accommodations or something, there's good reason then that maybe you would, like, I need headphones in the office. Like, that's a very typical potential neurodivergent um accommodation, would be to
Yeah.
wear noise canceling headphones in the office. Believe it or not, there are bosses who would throw a shit fit over that. You can't wear headphones in the office. Like, I mean, And that's another thing, like, for folks who are neurodivergent, like, it's like rude to wear headphones and stuff. People think that. No, that's like a survival strategy. That would be like
Yeah.
saying, "Oh, it's really rude to use crutches for somebody who can't whose legs aren't working properly." "Oh, you piece of shit, you're using crutches." Like,
How
but people
rude.
don't, yeah, how rude. Like, you've got no class. Like, but people can, I mean, that is something that would be said by people who are
Yeah.
using ear like, I sometimes use uh earplugs when I go out. In order to reduce the frequency of certain noises that I find unpleasant, that cause me to be distracted or cause me to not be present or cause me, in some cases, to shut down, to where I'm no longer paying attention to the whatever it is I'm doing. I mean, I
Yeah.
can't have the conversation. Is that, but some people would have a problem with that. Like, "Oh, you're not listening to me." No, I'm doing this so I can listen to you. So I
Right.
can, so to answer your question, no, I would not tell my boss I was autistic, or that I was on the spectrum, or
Well,
even now I don't. I mean, now I would, because I'm in a different field. So yes, my
right.
boss, the head of the practice I work at, knows I'm autistic. Like, we've talked. I mean, but that's a feature here. That's not a bug
Right.
in my
Totally.
current career. I think in corporate America, and I will argue, actually, it's a feature everywhere. It's just
Yeah.
people don't understand it. Like, people don't
Yes.
understand how neurodivergent individuals, uh how their nervous system works. And by the way, there is no just one answer to that. Like, I'm very
Right.
different than somebody else on the spectrum, than somebody else. Like, just because I'm neurodivergent doesn't mean I'm the same as another neurodivergent person. Like, and I'm not going to necessarily be friends with every neurodivergent person. So
Yeah.
it's not like some big club. However, there is a shared, um there's a shared vocabulary. There's a shared
Yeah.
experience there. So I don't know. I've wandered around a little bit here, but I I
No, yeah.
I think in a perfect world, I mean, in my world, yes, everyone should be free to speak their needs, and being neurodivergent, having a nervous system, having a brain that works differently than is typical, that responds to things in different fashions. That's, there's nothing wrong with you. You're not broken. You don't need to be fixed. You don't need to conform.
Yeah.
Um, and the world is not a just place right now. In the same way it wasn't in
Yeah.
Esther's time, probably going in there saying, "Yeah, I'm Jewish. Hey, hey," she might not have gotten the chance that she got.
Yeah.
And again, I don't know, like you, in like how you sort of answered the previous question of, I'm not really sure where I fall on this. Like, in a perfect world, yes, I want everyone. In a perfect world, I could go around, and I largely do now, because I don't give a shit anymore. Like, but that wouldn't necessarily be true were I still in my previous roles.
Right.
Because, you know what? The minute I say the words, I'm autistic, or I'm on the spectrum, or I'm neurodivergent, or, as you said, I have an anxiety disorder or a panic disorder, or I have, I'm subject to major depressive episodes, whatever the case is, that is a red flag. That, why is an employer, when I have 5,000 people applying to this job, am I going to take time to figure out your flavor of disability and if that's a good fit? No, I'm just going to move on.
Right.
And, I mean, that is the friggin' truth, unfortunately. I mean, as somebody who hired a lot of people, I mean, I never even got to that stage. I have no idea what our HR did. But I guarantee you there were likely flags. Again, I don't know, so I'm not telling,
Yeah.
but I have to assume it's going to be very unlikely, if you did say yes, you would get past certainly in a big corporation, that you would get past the computer. Like, I don't think a human would ever even see you, would be my guess. Um,
Wow.
in today's world. Now, and this is only going by what I've heard from other people. I have not been in corporate
Sure.
America for 3 years, thankfully, and never will be again. But I can only imagine AI and everything else has made it, because you're not selecting somebody because they've checked that box. No, 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 you can't do that. That's illegal. You're not selecting them for any one of the 3,000 other fucking reasons you and or AI could come up with. Based, now you don't even need to come up with it. Just let ChatGPT come up with why you can't hire why this person isn't a good fit for the role. And I guarantee you can find a reason. So yeah, I mean, I think we're sadly in a situation, which I dislike immensely, where you're probably better off keeping your shit to you.
Well, and I
um
think it does go back to safety, right? Like, do you feel emotionally safe to share certain aspects of your identity with people? That's a big thing. But like with Esther in this story, physical safety. And a lot of times with certain identities, it does put your life at risk. And if it's your livelihood, like, is someone gonna, if learns that you're neurodivergent and comes to your desk and whacks you? Like, no, that probably wouldn't happen. But could it cause different behaviors that could eventually lead to you losing your livelihood that then does put you and your family in harm's way? Like, that's a very real thing. And so I think safety is absolutely important. And if you're not in a space where you can be safe opening up, of course, any choice to keep that on the DL is absolutely valid. And the other thing that comes back up for me is the code switching, right? And are you going to ask for accommodations versus not? And I think part of me wishes that this is my idealism coming out. Part of me wishes that we lived in a world where you could just own a reality about yourself without that needing to mean anything from someone else. It's like, well, why are you telling me that? Because I want you to have information about me. I want to feel closer to you. I want to connect. I want to bond, not because I need something from you, not because that has to change anything about the way you treat me. It's because it's information about me, you know? And I would like to think that jobs could operate in that way. But I do think because we live, especially in America or in the United States, but in the West and under capitalism, everything is productivity and production oriented. It's like, okay, well, what's the point? What's the purpose? What does this lead to? What does this create? And we need to deal with it and solve it. And so if it's not a thing that needs to be dealt with and solved through quote unquote accommodations, then companies probably just don't care, don't want to know, big companies at least. But then you are inviting yourself into a world of code switching, of trying not to do that, which is having an additional burden on yourself. And even as sharing just some information about you, a way to say, hey, I don't want to code switch. It won't change the quality of my work. It won't change what I get done. It won't change my kindness or professionalism. It may change my energy level. It may change, me being able to say, like, hey, not in a social mood right now. Or, like, again, it may offer some shared vocabulary to talk about things, but it wouldn't necessarily, yeah. My brain just brain fart. I totally just went over.
To be fair,
you hear what I'm saying.
You don't know when we're recording this, dear viewer. You don't, but we are actually quite late for us.
Yes,
and I know I've already turned into a pumpkin, but it's Reese's energy that's keeping me going still. Frankly, because it is. I am officially a pumpkin. It's my bedtime, so
it's funny.
Not really, but no, I think and here's the thing. Yeah, so the problem is even if you I was well respected I was very good at code switching. I didn't know I was code switching. Maybe that's why I was so good at it. I call it masking really more than code switching necessarily for me. And again, I also want to be careful because I don't want to somehow try to equate being neurodivergent, being on the spectrum with, say, the type of discrimination necessarily that somebody, an African American sees, or,
right.
I mean, however, I will say I do feel, based on, conversations I've had with others, there is a common, we may not be speaking the exact same language, but it's definitely like they're very close. It's like Spanish and Portuguese, maybe, in terms of, we understand certain things. I'm never going to understand the exact experience that an African American woman has in corporate America. And I would never try to claim that I, as a white guy, could, regardless of my neurodivergence or anything else. However, I do think that there are similarities. So I think there is some shared experience there.
It's an entryway into understanding discrimination.
It is. And it's not a perfect fit. And I don't, but in a similar way, I think there is subtle discrimination. So in my previous roles, were I to go and say, oh, hey, guys, by the way, I'm autistic. I just wanted you to know, blah, 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 blah. I'm sure it wouldn't do anything at first. But the real question is when that next promotion comes along, and the powers that be are You know, it just
Well, and
gives
even unconsciously and subconsciously, like, even if someone isn't trying to.
right. Like, oh, well, is he gonna be able to handle pressure? Is he gonna be able to, oh, well, this requires a lot of communication, with our shareholders, with people. Well, is he gonna be able to do that? I don't want to deal with the drama, whatever it is. Like, I don't, it's safety is super important. And really, I wish a mission of mine, maybe I should make it my mission, is to make neurodivergent individuals feel safe in the workplace.
Mm,
Like, because it isn't safe. But the problem with a lot of folks is they don't even know that it's not safe. At least Mordecai had the wherewithal to say, hey, you might wanna, although again, he doesn't follow his own advice. So what the WTF, really? Like, he's not being subtle, but yet he wants Esther to be
mm,
subtle, which I do think is kind of interesting.
yeah.
Um, very interesting stuff.
Yeah. Well, and I think that just to really ground it back into the text, like, this is a story of protection in a lot of ways, right? Like, Vashti is protecting herself. Mordecai is trying to protect Esther in some ways, and then Esther is trying to protect her people. Um, and we just see how patterns of hurt and harm lead to the good guys needing to protect. Um, I think the last piece that is really important to talk about is, of course, the changing decrees, and of course, Haman being dethroned from his like chief advisor role, and that being given to Mordecai. One piece that I really didn't understand, and I'd be really curious to hear your thoughts on, Dennis, was the piece about how the king can't undo the decree of, like, on this day we all will go and kill all of the Jewish people. One, crazy that that was just a decree. Like, what? Wild. But I suppose we've seen pretty similar decrees recently. So that's interesting. But the fact that he couldn't just repeal that back, and it had to be a mitigating decree. And then on top of that, I was like, why couldn't you do some wordsmithing with the mitigating decree so that no violence happened whatsoever? But instead, at the end, it said the Jews then basically killed everyone that tried to come after them. And on one hand, I'm like, well, self-defense. If someone is trying to kill you and your people, you know, I get it. You're defending yourself. But also, if it's the purge, I'm like, if there's something we can do to just mitigate the violence altogether, I just found that odd. And I don't really know what to make of it. If there's maybe some historical context there that makes that make more sense as to why you can't change the decree and why they chose to just say Jews could fight back and kill those people too. Um, But I just found the violent end to be really upsetting, honestly. That it's like, and she protected all the Jews, but also there was still violence and bloodshed. Like, again, something we see a lot in the Bible, Jewish people's lives meaning more than other people's lives. Uh, but still, I don't know. I just really don't know what to make of it. What thoughts that you have on this bit at the end here?
Yeah, I'm not sure about the, why can't you just, why can't you undo something you've done? I don't, that'd be interesting. I'd be very
You're the
curious as
king.
to right. You're the king. To me, it just, I don't know. It almost sounds just like clever in some way. I wonder if it's even true. Like,
Yeah.
we, that'd be interesting. Somebody who was, we could ask ChatGPT, I suppose, but I'd really be curious. Somebody who's a scholar who understood, more context around that. To me, I think, I always just see it as sort of like a part of the narrative. It's just like something clever. Oh, well, I can't undo what I've done, but we'll let you do this instead. But I guess I do wonder, how do you read, I mean, essentially the violence in this. I mean, not only does this is about not only hang Haman, but hang his 10 sons as well. Like there's a definite vengeance going on here. And the violence. I guess my question or my thought is how do you see that violence? Is it self-defense? Is it justified? Is it an overreach, or is this just sort of an eye for an eye makes the whole world blind? This idea of trauma sort of responding to a threat, like what's
Yeah.
fair is fair. You wanted to kill me, buddy, so you should go too. I don't know. It is kind of over the top. It feels very. To kill Haman's sons as well. I mean, I guess you could argue, well, they're jerks too. Apple doesn't fall far from the tree and everything. I don't know. It does seem like a violent end, though.
Yeah, to me it does feel wrong, and I think that's because and maybe I would feel mm, I think what I'm about to say is really there's a lot of nuance that can be and should be put into this, but also want to be mindful of time. So, in terms of what it means to be Jewish and the definition of Zionism, uh, I think complicates what I'm about to say. And I just don't have the space to add in all that nuance right here. So I just want to kind of note that. But I think if I was Jewish and I identified as a part of the Jewish tribe, maybe I would read this story differently. Or maybe if I really identified strongly with a group of people that had been or have been persecuted, I would read it differently. But I think one thing that the Bible does time and time again is put Jewish people above other people in terms of value. And just to me, as a human being, I'm like, no life is more important than any other life. So why, for wanting to kill Mordecai, does Haman and his 10 sons get hung or murdered, executed? Like that does seem like overkill. And Mordecai didn't die. It's like we did solve it and figure it out. And maybe Haman should be like fired and left and he's a bad guy. But like, is murder wrong or not? Do we as human beings kill other people? If yes, then him wanting to kill Jewish people, maybe while unfounded and you don't have a reason for it, the killing in and of itself wasn't wrong. If no, and that's why you're mad that he wanted to kill all of these Jewish people, then killing's bad. It's like, do we use that format to ascribe justice? And to me, it doesn't feel like justice. And so all that to say, like, there is a difficulty I have with, like, all of these other people dying, but it's like, but the Jews were saved. And there's something just very sunshine and rainbows there that I really resist and have a hard time reading into, because I'm like, again, with the edict that, like, well, and the Jews can fight back and kill these people, I'm like, why can't the Jews just be saved? Like, why does the violence have to beget more violence? And it feels very counterintuitive to the message of obedience and, like, sacrificing yourself for the betterment of people. And I get that there is some loyalty that Esther has to her people, to Jewish people, because she is Jewish. But at the same time, I would like to think that that she would have done that for any group of people, because that's what good people do. And maybe she can't exactly, like, the context around it, because she is Jewish and that's kind of how she defends these people. But I'm like, if she said, I'm gonna leave you if you kill all these people, right? Like, I don't know. We could come up with some other scenario, but it's like, is what Esther did good because it saved Jewish people? Or is what Esther did good because it saved people?
Mm.
And to me, it's like, it should be because she saved people. And the fact that they're Jewish is just so happens to be part of the narrative. And so the fact that people still died, I'm like, so what is the point here? What are we supposed to gain from this biblical story? That Jewish lives are more important? Or that sacrifice is important to save humans? Uh, while we're murdering a bunch of humans. It feels very dissonant to me and a little upsetting. And a little upsetting there at the end. And again, I want to underline that, like, there's a lot of nuance in there, especially with the genocide against the people of Palestine happening right now, and the separation between being culturally and religiously Jewish and the Israeli state. There's absolutely a separation there. And I know that there's debate about what Zionism means. So I just want to preface that with what I'm talking about in terms of feeling connected to a people that is problematized and complexified by specifically the Israeli state and Jewish people, and that there's so much complexity here. But that's what I'll say for this kind of portion of trying to get at what our goal of talking about is. But your thoughts on that?
I mean, I think it does show how trauma changes how we see things in general.
Yeah.
Honestly, and I think we see that playing out today everywhere. But I mean, I think it's just I think it's true. It's been true in the past. I think it was true here. We as when we're traumatized, the natural instinct is to strike back, is to hit
Yeah.
back, is to hate those that hate us and love those that love us. And this is my issue really with everything going on in our country in terms of thumping the Bible or thump like Christianity especially. I mean, listen, they're perfectly. I mean, frankly, I understand why somebody who believes in the Old Testament might like Trump, for example, because Trump is the image of God in the Old Testament for sure. I mean, in a lot of ways, and so it makes sense why somebody it's the Christian element because Jesus didn't teach that, and it's not really clear. I mean, I know Matthew strikes it out how not one jot or tittle of the law will, but Matthew was writing for a particular audience for a particular reason, like generations after Jesus died. So, wasn't an eyewitness account. So, again, though, my point is I think trauma hardens our hearts. But the problem with that is you just end up doing the same thing you were having done to you. It just repays itself over and over again because you become what you behold. And when you behold vengeance and I think you see that here. No, again, could you argue, can you see the argument that would be made though? Well, Haman was a bad man. Clearly his sons are, if we leave his sons around, they're just going to do the same thing. Like they're going to plot against us as well. Like, you lost, buddy. And I think it is distressing because we're kind of seeing this same attitude play out in everywhere around us. People being fired, people being, indicted, all of these sort of things, and enemies and this, that, and the other thing. And honestly, I'm just tired of the enemies list. I'm tired. I don't like living in this space. So I think to me, I understand the tastiness of that vengeance. And this desire, you come at the king, you best not miss, like Omar, from The Wire, which everyone should watch. But yeah, so I think these are difficult questions that we're grappling with here.
Yeah.
I guess I have one more thing I'll ask, and then we can,
Yeah.
because we're coming up on time here, I'm pretty sure. But I kind of really like this. So, Esther saves the nation, right? But presumably she remains in a marriage and a system she didn't choose, right? So she's still married to the king. She's still, a product and has to play in that system. Yes, she has more power. In fact, she crafted laws. She created legislature. Yeah. So, I mean, she moved on up, but she's still married to the king. She's still the queen. We saw what happened to Vashti. So very clearly, like, you can be, one day, as Heidi says, one day you're in and the next day you're out. It's like Project Runway up in this place. So, I guess the question that is, does this story normalize sacrificing, personal freedom for public good? And how do you feel about that? So in other words, so Esther did all of this stuff, but she still, I mean, she essentially locked herself in this place. Now you can argue. So I mean, again, it's very arguable. Hey, she was an orphan before. Now she's the queen. Why the fuck? Who's going to bitch about that, right? I mean, who's going to be upset about that?
Right.
Like, but I mean, again, let's again turn it a little bit differently. So she's not, but she's in a system now that she can't really get out of. There's one way out, and then Vashti would probably say it's not pretty. So did
Yeah.
she sacrifice? And I don't know. Should you sacrifice personal freedom for public good? I mean, maybe that's a broader question, I guess, but
Right. On the story specifically, I think that she did sacrifice, she risked having to sacrifice the life that she had, right? But she ended up not having to sacrifice it. So I don't know if this story necessarily supports. Well, I think it does in some sense support personal sacrifice for public good, because that is kind of the narrative that has been built around what Esther does. But given what we've talked about here today and how becoming queen and choosing to go through this process is also a little self-serving on Esther's part to take care of herself, right? It's like sometimes you can be self-serving and serve other people at the same time, kill two birds with one stone. And I don't think there's anything wrong with that. In terms of like truly sacrificing personal freedom for public good, I think there's a debate to be made about Esther gaining or losing freedom here. In both, probably in different senses. But in a broader sense, I think the line is delicate. But yes, I believe that what is for the good of the public, I am always willing to sacrifice for, and I'll name a few examples. One, I think when we think about entering into what it means to be a citizen of a society, John Locke says, if men were perfect angels, there would be no need for government. Or governance is what he says, aka government. Because we do bad things, because bad things do happen, we need a justice system. And as citizens of a society, you enter into agreement to sacrifice your perfect freedom for what being a part of society offers you, which is protection and certain elements of social security, right? It's social security and physical protection. That's what government is offering you for your citizenship. And through that, I think that we take on certain civic responsibilities and civic duties in order to create governance in the way that we imagine it to be. Part of that is voting and being an educated voter and making your voice heard and being an activist in all of these ways and speaking up and speaking out. But also, I think the Second Amendment and gun safety rights is a beautiful example of this, right? Regardless of your opinion on a strict or loose interpretation of the Constitution and what must not be infringed actually means, I think anyone looking at statistics across the globe and in the United States can clearly and evidently see that implementing some stricter gun safety laws is going to make the people of the United States safer. Period. That is just a provable fact. And to me, that is a personal freedom that I am more than willing to sacrifice for the lives of mainly school children, but also so many human beings, right? Because it is this idea of like a freedom being infringed. But I'll give another example. Our freedoms are infringed by driver's license processes. You can't just get in the car and drive down the street whenever you want. You have to go through a process, and we've agreed to this process to protect safety, to protect the safety of people on the road, to protect the safety of each other that are living in society. And so we've all agreed that you need to have a driver's license and go through a driving test in order to operate a deadly machine. And that is the agreement we've come to as a society. And it's been voted on, right? Democratically. And now that's how we operate. And that is an example of a way that we sacrifice our perfect freedom. You can't just do whatever you want whenever you want. There are policies to do things. And when governance works well, it protects everyone's safety while maintaining the most freedom possible. But it's imperfect. It is so imperfect. And I think, yes, you want to maintain the most freedom possible, but there are certain freedoms that my personal opinion on does not matter if that is contributing to this overall danger of the society that I choose to be a part of. Because I can leave if I want to. I did for a year, right? But I choose to be a part of this nation. And that means I have a responsibility, and that means I'm going to fight for things like gun safety regulation because I believe in what that sacrifice means for the safety of all of the people that are a part of it.
I think that's a great example. I think the driver's license is a great example but then you see, when somebody gets older, right? Most elderly people are against having to take a driving test to retain your driver's license, which is a classic example of "fuck you, got mine." Like,
Yeah.
oh, rules for thee, but not for me. And so, it goes to show. But I love what you said, and I think we do make. I mean, and there's countless examples, right, of things we
Yeah.
do in the name of public good. And did she? I mean, really, did she sacrifice personal freedom? I'm not sure. I mean, in Esther's case, I don't know,
Right.
she's still queen.
We really don't know.
Like what more freedom could she have, really? Like what was she gonna do if she weren't queen? Like be an orphan in the city, and that's freedom? I don't know. So I'm not sure about that. I guess one more thing that occurs to me, and maybe this is a good way to close because I think it kind of wraps it up. Is Esther, and you said it in the beginning, so I'll tie it back to that. You watched a lot of videos and things, and Esther is definitely celebrated, certainly among Christians, and obviously, the Feast of Purim. It's celebrated by Jew. Esther is celebrated by everybody, but Vashti less so, as we've talked about. Even though I would argue they are both they demonstrate two different feminist paths, if you will. That both it's a yin and a yang. Both are necessary. You need both the absolutely not, the voice, the no, but I think you also need people within the system as well. So I think both are valid, frankly, and necessary, really. It's sort of a yin and a yang. That said, I mean, Esther is certainly celebrated way more than Vashti does. Do you think this is because she plays nicely with power, whereas Vashti is sort of sidelines because she was a difficult woman? And if so, so I'll answer the question. Yes, I think the answer to that is absolutely yes. But I'll let you answer. But if so, what do you think what meaning do you make? How do you interpret that for women today? How do you, particularly as a woman, what does that say to you? If in fact she is celebrated because of that, what do you make of that? What meaning do you put there?
Yeah, I mean, I think the obedience line is pretty clearly in support of what you just said, right? Like Esther being this model of obedience, like you can have freedom as a woman if you play nice, if you I like you having freedom when you choose the things that I like that you choose, right?
You can have any color you want as long as it's black, right?
Exactly.
That's the sort of choice, right?
Yeah. And so I think on one hand, like Vashti's role is just very small in the book, in the actual writing that we have. So to a certain extent, I think that probably lends as to why she's not as talked about.
But however, to be fair, though, if she were talked about more, wouldn't she be just like Delilah and Jezebel and all of the mean girls of the Bible, if you will?
Yeah.
Like she was a mean girl. She just didn't get a lot of press, or maybe this author was enlightened. I don't know. I'm not. That's what. Sorry to interrupt. I wasn't trying to interrupt.
No.
But I wonder if Vashti did get more screen time. how
Yeah.
would she have been the villain as well?
Yeah.
Certainly in other books she would have been. Now, maybe Esther's different. I don't
Absolutely.
know. Anyway, I continue.
Yeah.
I'm sorry. I
No, I
interrupted
think
you.
that's not at all. I think that's a really fascinating point and important to think about. And, like, do we want someone to get more screen time if that just means they're going to be painted as a villain? But also, it's been really cool for us to explore villains as a point of empowerment. So I think that is important. And so just all that to say, like, I think it would be easy to look at your question and someone say, okay, now we're reaching, right? To say, like, oh, is that why Esther's talked about and not Vashti? But I think the whole point of literary analysis, and the Bible at the end of the day is a literary text, is you're not trying to necessarily get at what the author is wanting you to get here. Like, that's part of it. But you also look at everything else that is there and the meaning that you can make out of everything that is there, not just the intended purpose of it. So, with that in mind, doing true literary analysis, this is absolutely, even if not intended to be there, a comparison that should be thought about and talked about in this way. And I think that it does make it harder for society to celebrate women that make choices with their own voice and on their own terms. And I mean, the fact that Vashti is just not talked about after that, it's like, well, and now she's irrelevant. She Eliza and Hamilton took herself out of the narrative, right? Like, just because she didn't want to be victimized by this, and she's like, then erase me from it, because that's not what people will remember me for. And so she's not remembered. Would she be remembered if she had been more villainous? Would she have been remembered if she was more obedient? But because she was temperate, but strong in her integrity, she's forgotten. I do think that if we wanted to make a more direct comparison between Esther and someone like Delilah, who is making sacrifices for their people, there is absolutely a comparison between what a Jewish queen and a non-Jewish woman doing similar actions looks like there. But also two women that are remembered, talked about in the zeitgeist, how they're celebrated very differently. And both of them use, I don't want to say underhanded, but maybe more strategic, cunning ways of dealing with patriarchy to take it down from the inside, right? And we talked about that when we talked about Delilah. But Delilah's talked about as a snake, as a traitor, because she lied and is treacherous and betrayal. But Esther is wise and smart and used all of these tools to get to the top, right? Because it's the side that the Bible wants you to root for. And
well,
so
and because God did it, right? Even though God's not in there, he still
and it wasn't
did
Esther, it was God.
It was very,
Yeah.
it was God. It was Esther had nothing to do with it. She was just obedient.
Of course not.
You know.
Even though God's not in here, it was God.
Yeah, it had to be.
Right, of course. And so I do think that, like, yes, temperance is absolutely celebrated and encouraged in women. And I think especially it's worth of note, like, the whole, if a woman talks up, she's not the boss like a man is, she's a bitch. But then the angry black woman trope is absolutely a trope for a reason, right? Like, that is such a thing. And the whole, oh, well, we don't need to get emotional here. Or is it your time of the month? Like, there are just all of these things that we could point to as ways of moderating and tempering women's passion, even if it's not anger, even if it's like, I'm fine, I'm just passionate, that women are shut down and made to be smaller, because ultimately what society is looking for from women is to be seen and not heard. And so when you hear women, it's upsetting because you're not supposed to be heard. You're supposed to just sit there and look pretty. So that the men can do the talking and get down to business. Because when you do talk, it's just emotional and you can't be logical and all sorts of different things that have that are, one, founded in sexism, but two, have also scientifically been disproven that that's not true. Women actually act quicker and with more ration under pressure. They actually have their neural pathways in certain parts of their brain tend to be more developed when it comes to rational decision making, and when it comes to withstanding pain. Childbirth, women are much better at withstanding pain than men are. And look at our current political leaders. They don't seem too good at managing their emotions. So just all that to say, like, that is not only just sexist, but it's completely scientifically unfounded too. But I think the really powerful example here is, like, the idea that a demure and mindful woman is classy, right? We definitely have this idea of, like, class that is rooted in classism, but also sexism, and a way of, like, keeping and maintaining power is like, well, the man may be the head, but the woman is the neck that turns the head. Like, you're allowed to be powerful as a woman only if you tie that power to being classy and silent and demure, but also very beautiful to look at. And then behind closed doors, how do you manipulate and, in this cunning, strategic way, implement your power? And not to say that that's, again, like you said, and going back to something we've touched on a lot throughout the episode, I think what you said about needing both methods is really, really valid. Like, which one is right and which one is wrong? I think we do need both. And same thing with what we said about sex workers, and same thing that we said about Esther. Like, I really like that it's like, both have to be true. We have to hold paradox here. So all that to say, is that necessarily anti-feminist? I don't know. I think you do need women to do that work. You know, it's like we need powerful first ladies until we have a first husband. But at the same time, we also need women that are loud and refuse to be demure and refuse to be quieted down. I'll tell a story because this made me mad, and I know we're running on time, but I want to tell it, and
I
I'll
want to hear it.
see
I
what
want to
you
hear
think
it.
about it.
Yeah.
So I was at dinner with some friends last week, and we're sitting down, and I'm, laughing and telling jokes and having fun and doing all the things. And one of my friends to my right, he's sitting there and he's like, "Whoa, my left eardrum is gonna, you're gonna blow out my left eardrum. I'm gonna wake up and I'm gonna be deaf in my left ear tomorrow." I kind of looked at him and I said, "Excuse me?" He was like, "Yeah, you're just being really loud." And I was like, I cannot believe you just said that to me. What an insane thing to say to any human. Wild. And you need to grow up. And then I kind of laughed. And was it a relatively loud laugh? Yeah, laughs are not quiet things. And he goes, "See, you're being loud right now." I was like, okay, think it's time for me to go.
I can appreciate
But
that because people have told me I'm loud my whole life. So that story is very near and dear to my heart. Now, maybe I am, because that is a characteristic of being neurodivergent, is not being able to modulate volume.
I'll own,
which I do.
I'm not a quiet person.
No, I am not a quiet person. But still, no one should say it that way. That is so fucking rude. I gotta be honest. That makes me angry just hearing that. Like, what a rude thing to say.
I'm like, dude, I'm laughing, and we're at a dinner at home where we're not disturbing anyone. Like, and I'm your friend. What? Clearly my joy was too big for you. That's what I hear about that.
And listen, if it really were like, okay, you were, I mean, certainly we've had, we've heard, I mean, I've been out and people, but that's not the way you, like, even if you were being, you're just crazy loud, which I can't imagine in a private home, number one, like you're not like struggling to be. The times I'm loudest is when there's noise around me. So like I feel like I have to be louder. If you're at a home, like, although again, I'm probably the wrong person because people tell me to shut up too because I'm too loud. So I appreciate your story and thank you for sharing it. And that was fucking rude. Whoever that friend was shouldn't be a friend anymore. So not that I'm telling you. No, no,
he doesn't listen. It's fine.
it
Yeah.
comes with the territory, I guess. But,
Yeah.
I think for me and where I think the last thing I'll say, going back to the question of what does that say to women today, right?
Yeah.
I would turn it on its head and I would say to women today, we all have our designs. Some are designed to be Esther, and some are designed to be Vashti, and some have different. We're all individual, and we all have our own personality. And not all of us are meant to be Vashti. Not all of us are meant to be Esther. But what I will say is the story of Esther doesn't happen if Vashti doesn't say no. So you can't have chapters 2 through 9 if you don't have chapters 1 of this book. And so we need our Vashtis, and Vashtis are welcome, as are Delilahs, as are Jezebels. This is everyone, both
Yeah.
Esther's and both Eve's and Lilith's. Everyone is welcome because we all have our role to play. But without Vashti, there is no Esther. Without Lilith, there is no Eve. That's all. That's going to be my last word on this. So
I
be
love
who
that.
you are, and I'm here for it. I'm here for the Vashtis, and I'm here for the Esthers alike.
I adore that. And I think that what you said about design is just so well said, in that when we're talking about balancing both of these approaches and the many nuances of approaches therein and in between, whatever your design is, whatever you feel called to in doing this work, all that's asked of you is your best. And your best is always going to be in alignment with your design, what you're called to move towards and comport yourself in and with as you exercise your freedom. And so I just think that's really beautiful and the perfect place to end. I completely agree. Thank you. Thank you for bringing that. Any last thoughts for our listeners before we close out?
Oh, we just so happy you're here, and keep your voice. Your voice matters, regardless. It matters so much. And here you're always welcome. I can't say out in the world, but here in our space, there is no gatekeeping. There is no entrance exam. You are welcome exactly the way you are. And yeah, that's all I got.
Absolutely. Thank you all for being here, and we will catch you next time.
Bye, everyone.
Bow Down is a weekly podcast from the Cohere Collective that explores esoteric and empowered feminism.
Please subscribe to Bow Down wherever you may be listening. And if you enjoyed the episode, please leave us a like, a 5-star rating, and a review. And if there's anyone you think would enjoy this episode, or maybe just needs to hear it, please share it.
If you want to stay up to date on all things Bow Down, you can follow the Cohere Collective on any social media platform at the Cohere Collective, and check out other content and offerings at www.thecoherecollective.com.
If you're interested in working with Reese to find and pursue your purpose, I encourage you to head to www.thecoherecollective.com/life-coaching.
If you're interested in working with Dennis to shed your mask and embrace your desires, you can email Dennis at dennis@theheartstoybox.com.
A huge thank you to Jack Corbett for Bow Down's music. You can find him on Instagram at j.corbe. Thank you all for joining us today. We're so glad you're here.
And as always, we hope you feel like you are living more coherently. And until next time, love.